hello everybody. And it's me again, Craig Anthony Ferreira, and this is a series on Great White Shark Chronicles. And I've been looking forward to this series very much. The other series are on the biology of the Great White Shark, also Great White Sharks and Best Behavior, and White Shark Chronicles, and then the submarine, of course. Now, why I've been looking forward to White Shark Chronicles is because it's just all the stories, all the experiences I've had out there with these extraordinary animals, and it's all connected as well. As I go through Great White Shark Chronicles, all my stories about how the White Shark Research Unit was formed, and our first sharks we tagged, and the first Great White Shark we tagged, and how I started learning about the behavior, and the first time I went free diving with great white sharks. It's all connected to the biology and also great white sharks and their best behavior. So there's going to be crossing over, there's going to be overlapping of information, but that doesn't matter because it all fits together. And by the end of the entire series, once you've listened to this particular series, Great White Shark Chronicles, and submarine, and biology of the white shark, and great white sharks and best behavior, you're going to know a heck of a lot about the great white sharks. But of course, I decided to do this particular series as a result of all the questions. Every time I give talks about great white sharks, or I'm on the boat, or whatever it may be, or I'm doing a documentary, people want to know, the experiences. Have you ever been in danger? Has the great white shark ever bitten you? Have you ever bitten a great white shark? This kind of people want to know what I've experienced with this extraordinary animal. So I'm going to start back in 1989, which is quite a long time ago. I'm not going to go further back than that because before that was a submarine, and I've already told you. That's a different series of this particular series on the great white sharks. It's a different program on it, the submarine. So I'm not going to talk about the submarine in this particular Great White Sharks, Great White Shark Chronicles. So I'm going to start off when we became involved in actually doing research on the great white shark and how we got the great white shark protected. Now, in 1989, here in Mossel Bay, where I am at the moment, somebody went out fishing at the Seal Island. We call it Shark Island nowadays. But some guy went out fishing near the seal colony and he lost an anchor. And three friends, I don't know if it was the next day or several days later, but three friends, two guys and a girl, and her name was Monique Price, they decided to go for a scuba dive at Shark Island. And they were going to go retrieve this anchor for the friend of theirs. So it was just a fun outing to go retrieve an anchor for a friend when they were out at the island, Shark Island. And it became a tragic day. All the fun, the adventure became a terribly tragic day because they donned all their scuba gear and they made the cardinal mistake that you never do around a seal colony or where you believe there are great white sharks in the area. They got into water and they lingered on the surface instead of getting into water and going straight down. Now, when you're diving with great white sharks, or you're diving at a seal colony, which I've done many times, you hit that water with your BC, your buoyancy compensator, completely void of all air. You time it, you say, okay, 1, 2, 3, you go into water, whether it's 2 or 3 of you, and I'll be giving you an example of when I've done that, and you head for the bottom, and you get to the bottom, and you subsurface. And once you become subsurface, your safety margins go up exponentially. They go up greatly. There's nothing saying a great white shark will not attack you when you're under the surface, below the surface in scuba gear, and it's actually extremely rare that this has taken place. So that particular day, they made the cardinal mistake of going into the water, and they lingered on the surface. And while they were still messing around on the surface and adjusting this and getting those species adjusted and their masks all sorted out, Monique Price was unfortunately attacked by a very large great white shark, probably about 4 meters long. And the shark hit her in the thigh, in the upper leg, and it was an extremely bad wound. She lost a massive amount of tissue. Obviously, the femoral artery was taken out, and she immediately started bleeding to death. So her two companions, the two guys that were with her, they got her onto the boat, but she was dead on arrival. She bled to death before they got to shore, before they managed to get an ambulance or any medical assistance for this woman. So this created an enormous media frenzy in the country, because never before had a scuba diver been attacked by a great white shark along our coastline, along the southern African coastline. Spearfishing had been attacked, surfers had been attacked, bathers had been attacked, but never a scuba diver. And to top it all, it was a woman. So there was a great amount of sympathy, of course, for this woman, Monique Price. But also in 1989, people didn't know about great white sharks. There was very, very little information on these animals. Even today, there's still little information on the great white shark, except really from a scientific perspective, when you go into their behavior or their biology. But there's still a lot that we don't understand about the species. Even experts, such as myself, there's a lot I don't understand about the great white shark. So this created this frenzy. And what happened? Two camps developed. And the one camp was massive. You had this massive anti-great white shark camp. And the media was screaming headlines, about this woman that had been savaged by a great white shark and ripped to pieces and killed by a great white shark. And of course, people were very upset, and it was very traumatic. So this one camp was, let's go out there and catch the shark. Let's kill this great white shark, this offending animal. And then you had a smaller camp, which my father and myself were also involved in. And that camp was the camp of reason. And we were saying, listen, it's an accident. It's 1 in a million chance. The shark didn't target this woman. The shark had no malice towards her. It was just a predator, and she got into the water at a seal colony, and the shark thought she was a seal. The shark was hunting, and the shark, unfortunately, attacked her and killed her. So that was the voice of reason. So there were people, such as ourselves, that were talking for the shark, for the great white shark, and very specifically my father. He was in the news, so they kept talking to certain guys, certain spearfishermen, or certain people that were saying we should kill the shark, and then the newspapers would interview my father, and my father would say, what's the point? It's just an animal. If you kill the shark for attacking this woman, then what stops us from going and killing all the lions, all the crocodiles, or all the hippos that may attack and kill somebody in a wildlife incident? But what came out of it was very interesting, because there was a guy running the Shark Research Center at the South African Museum, and his name was Leonard Compagno, or is Leonard Compagno, and he's a scientist from California, and he was the head of the Shark Research Center at the South African Museum. And Leonard was obviously very pro great white sharks, and he was the voice of reason as well. And Leonard is an A-grade scientist. He doesn't do shark science anymore, but at that point he was one of the best great white shark scientists on the planet, and probably the best white shark taxonomist on the planet. He didn't have a lot of actual water experience, field experience with the animals, But when it came down to what is a great white shark and the knowledge that was available in 1989, he was right up there with the best. And anyway, so what happened? Because of my father's fame, or he was notorious for hunting great white sharks, the Mossel Bay municipality contacted my father and asked him if he would come down to catch this offending great white shark. And by this time it had been established that it was around about a 4-meter long animal, which is a very big shark. So my father was reluctant, but what had happened in the meantime, the municipality had put up a bounty on the shark's head. So you had this typical crazy Jaws scenario where you had every Tom, Dick, and his cousin Harry out there chumming up the waters and throwing blood and pieces of animal and guts and fish and all sorts of things into the water to become the one to catch this killing monster and get the bounty for actually catching this offending shark. And so they actually made the situation worse, because now this island only lies 700 meters from shore, and you had all these boats around there chumming the waters and baiting the waters, but no great white sharks were found. They weren't finding great white sharks, and even if did swim past, these guys were mostly palookas, and they didn't even know how to catch a great white shark. So my father said, okay, fine, I will come down to Mossel Bay and I will hunt this shark that killed Monique Price, as long as the bounty is removed. And of course, once the bounty was removed, once the municipality retracted the bounty on this animal, all the interest was lost, because now guys didn't want to go out there and spend fuel and their own time and money to try and catch this shark. And that all dissipated, and my father came down to Mossel Bay from Cape Town, and the Mossel Bay municipality, they supplied him with a boat, and they supplied him with a couple of crewmen, and they paid for the fuel, of course. And my father said he didn't want any money, they must just supply him with accommodation and pay for the fuel to drive up and drive back to Cape Town, etc., etc. So my father came to Mossel Bay, and he spent a week on the water hunting this particular shark. We went to the island, chumming, and during that week, only one shark came to the boat, which was a 3-meter great white shark. And my father looked at it and he said, this is not the offending shark. The shark is too small. So he actually took the fishing gear out of the water, and he let the shark just pass off and go on his own way. And eventually, after a week, my father held a press conference, and he said, listen, as far as he's concerned, it's pointless trying to hunt the shark. The shark is long gone, and to try and target one particular great white shark that attacked one particular human being was almost an impossible thing to do. And it all subsided, and the media attention went away, and the hysteria went away, and that was the end of it. And believe it or not, that is the last attack that took place here in Mossel Bay since 1989. That was the last attack. There was an attack a few years ago on a surfer at a place called Glentana, which is, I'm not sure exactly how far it is from where I'm sitting at the moment in Mossel Bay, but I would say it's maybe 30 kilometers away along the coast, and there was an attack there, and unfortunately the surfer was killed. But what occurred then is my father came back to Cape Town, and he connected with Leonard Compagna, because they were on the same team. They were both on the team that was of reason and saying, listen, leave the shark alone and blah, blah, blah. So my father phoned Leonard up, and he said, listen, I didn't know about you before. And Leonard knew about my father, because my father had been in the newspapers and that so many times, and often in articles on great white sharks Whenever there was an incident, the newspapers would phone my father. So my father didn't really follow that stuff, and he didn't really follow Leonard, so he didn't know Leonard. But Leonard knew about my father. So they got together. So my father went to the museum, the Shark Center at the Natural History Museum, and Leonard and my father got together and they started chatting. And they found common ground. And my dad said to Len, he said, in their conversation, first of all, Leonard was, he was so interested in the submarine because this is the biggest great white shark that had ever been sighted. So he couldn't wait to meet my father and ask my father about the submarine. And they spent hours talking about all the encounters my father had with the submarine. Anyway, my father then found out from Leonard that my father actually asked him, he said, Leonard, what research is taking place on these great white sharks? What are people doing? What do you know about them? And Leonard said, there is no research taking place on great white sharks. There's almost no research in the entire world taking place on great white sharks. He mentioned to my father the Farallon Islands, where there were a couple of scientists studying Ken Goldman and Scott Anderson and Peter Parr. They were studying white sharks attacking elephant seals. But he said along the South African coastline, the only research was really taxonomy on dead sharks, dead great white sharks. And these were great white sharks that were being caught in the nets, the anti-shark nets up in Natal, off the Durban beaches. So the Natal Sharks Board, or the Natal Anti-Sharks Board as they were called, they were catching great white sharks in the shark nets to protect the beaches. And obviously they were dissecting them. Their chief scientist, very good scientist, Jeremy Cliff, he was dissecting these sharks and he was sharing information with Leonard and another scientist called Rudy van der Al. So there was very little taking place when it came to research on the great white shark, and there was zero population dynamics research being taken on the great white shark. And when I say population dynamics, that is going out there onto the ocean and actually working with the animals, trying to get a count on the population, trying to see if their movement, trying to understand the size ratio of the population, the sex ratio of the population, the seasonality of the population, where were they occurring. There was zero research taking place, and the great white shark was not protected at all. So it was open season. Anybody could go out to sea and catch great white sharks. My father was quite shocked actually. He knew that the great white shark wasn't protected. So he said to Leonard, but how many of these sharks are being caught? And Leonard didn't have exact numbers, but he was keeping tabs. And he told my father that there was actually quite a heavy white shark fishing industry taking place in South Africa. And then he also explained to my father the same as I'd explained to him, because I personally knew this stuff already just from reading. But he reiterated with my father that the great white shark is not an animal that could sustain hunting, being caught by human beings. And he said that if it wasn't stopped or if it wasn't managed, that eventually the population would collapse. And my father said to Leonard, so what are we going to do about it? And Leonard said, what do you mean, what are we going to do about it? My dad said, well, we've got to do something about it. We've got to start doing research on this animal. Because by that time, my father had become a huge great white shark conservationist. And my father said, we need to do research. We need to start an organization that does research on great white sharks. And that is how the White Shark Research Unit was born, because Leonard was very excited. I mean, Leonard is a scientist. When it comes to dealing with people and raising money, and that, he's useless. But as a scientist, he was a master. So my father and Leonard went to have a meeting with the top brass at the Natural History Museum. They were all excited because, of course, the great white shark is a very sexy animal, and it brings in a lot of what do you call it? It brings a lot of recognition. So they said, yes, we're happy to get behind this. We don't have the funding for it. So you have to sort out the funding, but we will provide you with office space. We'll provide you with whatever we can at the museum. And it's a big museum with research labs and everything. So that is how the White Sox Research Unit was born. My father and Leonard established the Great White Sox Research Unit. And that was established in the early part of 1990. So that's the first story I'm going to tell you, and with Chronicles, and from here we'll just continue. So wait for the next one.